Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Again, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I'm so conditioned.
Yeah. So it's okay. So, so one thing I think is this creating an environment is also a process. It's not like you create an environment and that's it, right? Like the first environment, the first thing that you need to add, I think, or do is not to do anything, in the sense that
Yeah.
the lesser you do, the better it is, because uh, see, children who have not ever been to school, uh, it's a different story. But if your child has been to school for a few years and then you are thinking of unschooling, then they're already used to this whole doing thing. They're constantly doing things, because the whole culture of school is about doing. So there will be a lot. So you can either uh, keep on doing those things, but then if you keep on doing those things, your child is not really going to understand what unschooling is, neither will you. So therefore the whole deschooling process. So now, but then if you've never sent your children to school, so your environment starts right from the day you conceive your child, or right from the day the child is born or whatever. So uh, so more than doing, it is observing, actually. So you have to let your child lead you, in the sense that you have to observe and witness and notice what the child is asking for, right? So if the child is asking to play with you, then you play with the child. Now if you can't play all the time, which is not possible, especially in nuclear families, it gets quite tiring if the parent has to do everything. So, but you have to recognize that your child needs to play, and therefore you have to make those arrangements. So either you have play dates where children are playing, and the parents are relaxing, or you have friends where you can send your child for a while, or you have the means to hire certain. I remember when my children were young, and I might not have the time or the energy to play with them. I had hired young school going kids, like you have, like my domestic help had a daughter, and she was around 14, 15 years old. She used to go to a school during the day. She was studying in a government school, and I asked her, is she open to some pocket money, like, um, so she obviously, she was so excited, like, yeah, 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 pocket money. So I hired, over a period of time, I kept hiring, these 14, 15-year-old girls, and they were very happy because they got pocket money, and they were very happy to be playmates to my children. Mind you, I did not hire them to look after my kids as caregivers. No, I mean, that is not the purpose. The purpose was to hire them for just like 2, 3 hours to just play with my kids, or take them to the park and play with other kids. So things like that I have done, or just stay at home and uh, engage in whatever my child wants to engage in. So I was very fortunate to find such girls, and they were always very cooperative and interesting. And I also communicated quite openly with them, and I didn't treat them like uh, employees, but more like, helpers for me, like how teachers have assistant teachers. I treat them that way, and with dignity, and I give them pocket money. So things like that. So basically, to follow what your child wants. If your child wants to play, then you play. You provide playtime. You create playtime. You can be the thing. Or if there are siblings, then they play with each other. Or you create play groups, play dates with other unschooling, homeschooling parents. Then you go, if they want to go outdoors, and you create more outdoor time, like picnics, park dates, things like that, cycling, just going for drives or hiking or things like that. And so that's with play dates. I think with my children, when they were young, we had lots of play dates. uh, the bunch of homeschoolers would make it up, like we had fixed dates of getting together in one home or the other. And we also realized that our children didn't really want to go outdoor and play. They wanted to hang around in the house and play with whatever they had. So it could be just fooling around in the house with Legos and stuff like that. The girls would do their own thing, the boys would do their own things. So we were a bunch of people, they're all grown up now, a bunch of people who would just get together, and we moms would just sit around, have a chai, nashta pani, and let the kids just play, free play. We didn't control it. We did not plan activities, or we did not get a resource person, or we didn't want to make it meaningful, like, okay, play date, we have to make it meaningful. Some learning must come out of it. We must call a resource person who tells us this or does a craft. None of that. It was just pure fun, free play dates. And we women, like we moms, had a good time because we would all get some food, some snack, and we would just gossip and have fun while the kids played. And yeah, sometimes there would be some needs of the children, like maybe they get into a conflict situation, or the kids need something. We would, of course, attend to all that, but we never made it a structured play date. It was always an unstructured play date, always, whether it was in the parks or at home, always unstructured. So we did that very religiously, actually. That really helped. That helped the kids to bond, and that helped us parents to bond a lot. So that's one thing we did. The other thing is, even among the groups, we figured that some children have similar interests, and their interests don't match with the rest. Then we tied up more with those people. Then, like, we did night outs in each other's homes. We let that child come over, or our child go over, and we let them connect more on common grounds. So we did that kind of thing. And of course, keep on observing the child. So you have to see what the child is going for. So if the child is going for wants to be read to, you read to the child. If the child wants to scribble around with paint and clay and stuff like that, you have those resources. So basically, a lot of free play, a lot of craft and art, a lot of free access to kitchen, so that they can play around with kitchen stuff, uh, and music, a lot of media, videos, and animation, cartoons, nice movies for kids, things like that. And of course, throw in some outdoor activities and all. But most of it, according to me, needs to be unstructured, without a goal or a purpose. Because if you do that, then it is going to be a big hassle for you, and you won't be able to keep up with it. It will again become a matter of karna hai, karna hai, karna hai. So a lot of this free stuff. So and also with art and craft and paint, not to bother about tidying things up, like, okay, abhi saaf karo, like, really, give access to the children, so that they don't bother you too much. They should have access to things on their own, and they can take it and they can do it, and then they keep it away. And things like that is what creates a more free environment for unschooling. uh, yeah. And you pick on that, like, you if you observe your child, you will see that your child is drawn to certain things more, and then you provide more of that. and don't force things upon them. More suggestive, like, like just leave it around, or just suggest. If your child doesn't want to take the suggestion, don't push for it. uh, Things like that. But as the children started growing older, Suma, they no longer wanted play dates. That's something we realized. We moms wanted it, but our children didn't. So our children wanted more solitude, more downtime. They wanted to be by themselves. They didn't want to be with other kids a lot. So those we had to stop, and we just uh, we said, okay, now our children don't want play dates. So, or they just want to meet one or two of them. Uh, so play dates stopped. Like, or one child wanted it and the other didn't. When we have two kids, so yeah, so these are the ways to create an environment. I think somebody, yeah, okay, yeah,
So
continue.
okay, this was with younger kids. Now what did you do when the kids became older, like 10, 12? How did they start reading? How did they start writing? Because these are the common question that comes up in any unschooling family. Like, so you don't ask the child to write or read. How did they start, or how do they start, or what should we do, and questions like that about reading and writing. Since your daughter was already in school, maybe she got a little bit from there. But what did you do with your son? Or how did he
So,
learn to read or write?
you see, my son, also, my daughter also was hardly, like, she was just about 5.5, 6 when she left school. So she's already young. It's not that she was very old at time. So yeah. So for me, it was a very natural progression because they were with me right from the beginning. In the sense, they hardly spent any time in school. So for us, it was just a natural progression. So the fact that I mentioned about observing my children is something that I still do. That hasn't changed. So that's one of the principles of unschooling. Like I always say, what are the principles of unschooling? So the principle of unschooling is that you observe and you engage. Your engagement has to be based on your observation. You don't engage and then observe. No, it's the other way around. So you kind of observe and you engage on those terms, on those areas. And it has been like that. So it just kind of, the observation remained the same for me. Now my daughter's 19, I'm still observing. My son is 15, I'm still observing. That hasn't changed. My children might have grown up in body and size and mind and all that. Their interests, they have more, they're more perceptive than they were as children, maybe, or their intelligence has changed and grown. So, so at when they're younger, they might not be as communicative. So therefore you have to do a lot, you have to do a lot more of the work because they might not be so communicative, right? But as they grow older and they trust you, because when you observe and engage, they trust you a lot. So when they trust you a lot, then they start communicating. So when they reach the age of, around 8, 9, 10, then they start communicating, and you observe that communication and you then provide the resources according to that. So and now, and then it's like 12, 13, their communication skills are improving even more. It's becoming more wider, more precise, and so they communicate to you that, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that. They come and share stuff with you. When they share stuff with you, you know that these are their interests. So it's all about observing and engaging. I mean, no matter what age your child is, and that is one of the basic principles of unschooling. And when they grow older and they want to pursue something more seriously, and they kind of tell you that, I would like to do more of this, then you decide, like, you ask them, so would you like to do it by yourself, or would you like some teachers or mentors? Do you want to try this out? Do you want to try that out? And be open to them saying no,
Sorry, sorry.
or be open to them saying, yes, I will try other mentors, but be also be open to them not being happy with that. and changing that mind also, because I've had my son has changed his mind a few times. Sometimes he has just been not happy with the mentor and he changed the mentor. Sometimes he's not been happy with what he chose, so he dropped it. So to be as a parent open to this, that this is an exploration, and some things will stick, some things will not. So that's how you go about it. And also sometimes you need to observe that what is the problem. Is it the mentor? Is it the environment where he is going? Or maybe some things need to be changed at home to make him, give it a shot, like sustain it more. That also. So like I remember when my son started drumming, he was very, so there were so this was the first time he was going for a formal learning with someone else. And this was around, I think he was 12 or so, or no, maybe 11 actually. And he he went for the first two classes, and for the third class he was complaining of a headache and this, and I don't want to go. So I needed to really sit and ask him, like, is the headache temporary, or is there something wrong? You don't like the teacher, or are your other students in the class, are you unhappy with that, or is it that you really think you don't want to do drums? But I remember my son being very clear that no, I just have a headache and I don't want to go. so so okay, so that happened one or two times, but the third time I was a bit concerned that, okay, if third time headache, what is this? So then I realized that, then we again had a conversation, and then we realized, then I had to push him a bit at that time. I said, see, when you try something new, the mind resists, because the mind is not used to this routine now, so the mind is resisting. I would urge you to at least give it a month, like give it a month and see. If you, after that also if your headaches persist, then we will leave it. And and I also kept asking him, so you don't like drumming? He said, no, no, I love drumming. So it's not that he wanted to leave drumming, right? It was just his mind resisting the whole new routine or the new structure that he had to follow his interest. So it's like a balancing act, really, as if you're walking a trapeze or something, or on a tightrope, because you can't push too much, you can't push too less. You need to engage and be compassionate with empathy. uh, you know you have to gauge how it is, so really. And also you have to connect with your own intuition as a parent, because somewhere, if it is not feeling good in your guts, in the sense that if something is poking you, then probably it is not the right thing to do. Okay, but if you are also feeling good in your body, then probably it is the right thing to do. So you have to see that for yourself, how it goes. So yeah, I don't know if that kind of answers your question.
I guess the thing is that we want to push the child before the child is ready. The child might not be ready at 5 or 6 to read or write, but the child is eventually ready at 8 or 7. But then we are just pushing him beforehand, and that's where maybe they lose interest. And
Yeah, so about reading and writing, I think I missed out telling about that. Is that uh, I, uh, I, my daughter, since she had already been to kindergarten, she had already picked up reading and writing. I mean, little bit, like alphabets, simple words, and things like that. Uh, so, but after we started unschooling, I did not push her to improve on that or build on that or anything like that. uh, but I did ask her, and I asked her if she would like to be able to read more or write more, and she said yeah, she would like to, and then I helped her. But I didn't help her too much either. I mean, I didn't really sit down and do drills with her or make it a point. Once in a while, we would sit, and a lot of it was just respond to their questions. So, if my daughter was typing something on the computer and she needed help with typing, I just guide her. Like she already knew the alphabet, so I just tell her, okay, type A, now type B, now type this, now type that. And so slowly she learned. I don't even know when she did, but she did. And my son, of course, had not been to any formal reading writing, so I never taught him to read and write. Really, I don't know. I mean, he's just learned it all by himself, um, by engaging on computer and his gaming and things like that, and by asking, like just asking me all the time, I want to search this, I want to search this, now tell me how to. So initially I type it for him, but then you know how the search engine just kind of has memory of what you have typed earlier. So he knew the things which he had searched before. He knew to he would search it with recognition. So it was recognizing the alphabets, not as much as knowing how to read. So um, so reading through imagery. So this is some pedagogy that I learned. I'm not a trained teacher, but I learned it from my son, that he learned words through imagery. So when he saw the search engine throwing up the same thing which he had searched for before, he could recognize the imagery of it, and that's how he learned that word. He learned to spell it, speak it, and write it. And then slowly he started saying, no, you don't type for me, you tell me and I will type. So then I tell him, okay, this now type this alphabet, type that alphabet. So he started doing that, and before you knew, he was on his own actually. So I must say that the computers are such generous teachers. They don't punish your children or ridicule them, or they like really help your children to learn so much more. So yeah, I think they learn to read and write mostly by completely unconventional ways. And another thing is that my daughter was always fond of writing journals, even when she was like 11, 12, 10 years old. She just wanted to write. I don't know what she used to write. Then she would show it to me. See, I have written. Now, a lot of it was correct in terms of spellings, but there were a lot of other spelling errors. But I made it a point to not point those out to her, uh, because honestly, I could recognize what she had written. So there might have been a E or a O here and there missing, but looking at it, I knew what she had written. So I knew what she was trying to say. Therefore, I did not point out the small errors in spellings and things like that. And and that got self-corrected by itself as she grew older. And then, of course, then when she was using the typewriter, the keyboard to type, you know you have the help of thesaurus and spell checks and things like that. So then slowly she has kind of figured all that out by herself. And now she writes. I mean, she's presented, she's written her profile, she's written interviews, she's written articles for other people and things like that. And she has sent them. So she's managing. And my son, of course, is fluently reading and writing, so I don't have any. So no, I never sat them down. Yeah, he's 4 years old, so he should know how to read and write. Now he's 10 years old, he should know how they should. I've never done that. I've just followed my children's needs as they came up. The same thing with counting and computing. I think I never bothered about stopping them from using the calculators, because we live in a modern world. कौन ऐसे ऐसे account करेगा, really. Like, I've always encouraged them to use the. I've told them this is plus. So if you want to add things, this is a plus sign. If you want to take away, this is the minus sign. If you want to increase uh, by times, then this is the multiplication. If you want to see how many sharing groups you want to make, this is division. So I've just told them that much, and they've used it. And then my son was always into researching prices of video games and prices of Legos. So you do comparative study, on the website. Okay, in the US it is so much. Mom, how do I know how much it is in rupees? So then I teach him, how to do it. Like, okay, use the calculator, but this is what you need to do. And that's how he's learned to multiply and divide. Like when he wants to find out in other currencies, he knows how to do it. Like so, and he just picked up through his interests how to count and stuff like that. And my daughter learned a lot of math through music, because in music you have meters and you have notes and you have gaps and you count your notes and all that. So she's uh, learned a lot of it through music and through her baking, of course, because she has to measure, she has to weigh, she has to do the cups and the spoons and 3/4 and 1/4 and all that. She's learning through her baking and all that. So
No, actually, that's excellently told. Like a child or any person, for in general, even we adults would learn only when we need to use it. Like we don't want to learn something, and if we don't want to use it, no one wants to learn it. And we just miss out that for our children. We think we have to teach them everything, even if they don't know what the ABCD mean, and in future.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess, like you said, trust the child, and when the need is there, the child will automatically come up to you and eat your head to find out answers, and that's when your time it is to answer. Okay, my last question, and then we take questions from everyone. So is there any resources that you would like for the parent who are looking for unschooling and self-directed learning kinds, anything that you read which inspired you, or they should read to learn more about this kind of environment, or just.
Yeah, so a lot of my resources have been my friends. So actually, so parents who have been unschooling for some more time than me, when I was a young unschooler. So parents who had probably been already on the journey for the last 2 years, 3 years, even 1 year actually. So I learned a lot from them. So a lot of it was peer study basically, and then reading up on the blogs of a lot of unschooling parents. There's a whole bunch of them out there. Reading books which were written by a lot of unschooling parents too. All those things, a combination of all those things helped. And I of course I read a lot of Osho as well, because I liked his way of such an unschooling man, and the way he thinks was very unschooly, in the sense that his main message to the world was that every human being is unique and every human being has a different path, and all you have to do is kind of nurture it and encourage it, and then the person will live up to his or her full potential. And that does not mean the path will be easy and it will be not won't have obstacles and pitfalls, but that's the only way to live. So a lot of my inspiration is from Osho and Tagore and Aurobindo and John Holt and these kind of people. And of course, like I said, blogs of other unschooling parents, books written by unschooling parents, joining different forums and asking questions, reading other people's questions, not only focusing on my question, but even reading other people's questions, because I might have missed out on asking that question. But when somebody else asks, then I say, oh, yeah, that's my question too. And then reading those responses, uh, you know, yeah. So those are the resources, I think, more or less, that help me.
Okay, so anyone have any question in particular to ask? You can turn on your mic and you can question.
I want to take one of the questions come in chat by
Yeah.
Rishikesh. He's written, my parents never fussed me about cleaning, but after marriage, my wife is not okay about me keeping things fussy, messy. Will it not create problem? Yes, of course it will create problem, but you have to engage and talk to your wife and like like really have put across your needs to her that it's not so much your need to keep things in a certain way, but also perhaps respect the fact that it is her need, and you could have a chat with her and ask her, look, this is not my need, but because I love and care and trust, respect you, I am willing to cooperate with you, but these are the areas where I can, and this is how far I can. Beyond that, this is your need, and you can do what you want to keep meet that need. I'm not against it, but uh, I am not disrespectful of your need as well, but I cannot fully be that way also. I can support you, but I cannot fully become like that. So find out a middle ground. Maybe there are some things you don't mind cleaning up, and maybe some things she doesn't like leaving mess. So it's all about engaging and conversing rather than fighting about it. So to be really honest with each other, uh, yeah. So, but it's certainly not that because your wife wants things to be clean and prim and pop proper, you have to completely let go of your nature and your way. So internally you need to see whether order and cleanliness is your need also, but because your parents never bothered, you also didn't bother. So examine that, like, maybe it could be either way. So you also need to see that, do you like it when your wife cleans up everything and you come home to a clean and orderly house? Do you like it? Do you enjoy it? If you enjoy it, then it is your need as well. But if you don't enjoy it or if you don't care for it, then it is not your need. So ask yourself. Uh, so it's all about contemplation and observing, not just you, observing yourself also, what is happening. Because I know a lot of people, they love order, they love cleanliness, they love everything to be beautiful as long as someone else is doing it, not me. So, but if you also love it, then you have to also cooperate. If you don't care for it much, then you have to find out how her need can be met without you having to compromise too much. Yeah, I hope that answers
He's
your
told
question.
the cleanliness was not my need, but I guess every human being has certain amount of, at least a basic amount of cleanliness. Like, I'm sure if your wife is not there, you can never go to your house again. So I
No,
heard
no,
like
he's saying cleanliness was not my need, but he is trying to meet his wife's needs, which is really nice of you, Rishikesh. But don't do it at the cost of your peace of mind. So you have to find a middle ground with her, have that conversation with her. And maybe if it's her need and you cannot contribute towards that need, then maybe you need to hire someone who can do it on your behalf. Like, like how I hired a babysitter, you can hire someone who will assist her in cleaning and keeping things in order. So yeah.
So Lola, just the same question. Um, how does that apply in your household? Like not yours specifically, in a household, for between two parents and the kid, because I don't see a kids need to have a clean play. I mean, they just play. They will never clean unless it comes from them for some specific reason, and it does come at some probably a little bit older age. But for the smaller age, and if you want to instill that responsibility on them, is that against unschooling principle, or it is a family value, right? So some people would want a clean house. So if both the parents everybody in the house agreed it, but the kid doesn't want to do it. How do you go about in those circumstances? So in my case, for example, my child, she's 8 years old. She loves to play with us all the time. And as much as energy is there, we do play with her. But as you said, at some point we get tired, and then the screens take over. So there is always that dependence. I like your idea about hiring some teenagers and all that. That's a great idea. But is there another way to ask them to get bored? My question is that alone space. They never seem to have that alone space. Either there are these videos, either there is company by friends, or it is parents. So in my child, I am struggling with creating a boredom space. Can you give me any pointers?
So Shri, you asked two questions actually. Your first question is about the need for cleanliness. So I'll answer that first. So
Yeah, just in the terms of cleanliness, in terms of life skills, like anything, we're taking small chores in the house, anything.
yeah. So so there is nothing wrong with wanting a clean and orderly home, but it should not be at the cost of your child's need to explore and create. So you have to I know of parents who refuse to let their children play or be creative or mess around, so that they don't have to clean up, right? So then there's like abhi ye mat karo, abhi ye mat karo, now don't do this, now don't do this, oh now you've messed up, now you've done this, I won't let you do this if you don't clean up. And so these are the messages that parents are giving out all the time, advertently or inadvertently, verbally or non-verbally also. So unschooling is not about not wanting cleanliness, order, chores to be shared. Unschooling is about uh, being opposed to free play and mess, because you have to clean up. Okay, so you have to let go of that mindset and then approach the whole thing. So you have to partner with your children, right? You have to partner with your children. So you have to have conversations with them as to uh, like make them feel that you are not opposed to them making a mess with their free play, whether it is with toys or legos or uh, craft and art or whatever, kitchen's produce or whatever, that you're not opposed to that at all because you dread the cleaning up. Okay, you have to you have to cooperate with them by making things accessible to them, right? Like I know uh, a lot of families, what they do is the art and craft material is locked up on some high shelf in a cupboard, and every time the child wants access to it, the child comes to the parent, I need this, I need that. Then the parent is like thinking, if I give it to him now, he's going to create a mess. Very soon it is going to be meal time, very soon it is nap time. No, I won't have time to clean up, so I don't think I'll give it to him now. Okay, so don't do these kind of things. Okay, or you might say, oh god, now I don't have the energy to clean up, so I'm not going to give it to them. That is setting yourself up for unnecessarily conflict. So what you do is, you have to make practical changes, not so much ideological. What are those practical changes you can make? Get baskets. Okay, if not commercial baskets, but cardboards, like boxes. uh, Put a whole bunch of craft material in them, like papers, pencils, colors, and keep them at the child's level. So put them under the beds or under the sofas or in